Hello everyone, and welcome to this video for Cannexus23. My name is Presant, and I'll be taking you through an introduction to micro-credentials and digital badges, making connections along the way to career development. I've been working in this field since 2011, and I'm one of Canada's leading experts on the topic, so I think you'll find it useful. This is an update to the presentation I made at last year's Cannexus, and it includes a brand new section on more open and inclusive forms of credentialing and recognition that I hope will generate lots of feedback. Please jot down any questions that come up for you during the video, and I'll be happy to answer them in the Q&A session on January 23rd, or you can reach out by email. So let's get started. This is about making skills and experience visible, so I'll begin with a quick visual bio that includes a micro-credential. I started in EdTech at TV Ontario. I led the team that took them onto the internet in the early 90s, before it was popular, I like to say. I left TV Ontario in 2000 to set up Learning Agents as an EdTech consultancy. Our first big client was Red River College in Winnipeg, and Winnipeg is where I'm still based. Since then, Learning Agents has focused on career journeys, lifelong learning, and the recognition of lifewide learning, first with e-portfolios, and then with open badges and micro-credentials since 2011. At Learning Agents, I currently wear 3 hats. I advocate for more open forms of recognition that go beyond course certificates. I provide consulting services for digital credential projects based on open badges. And we're hosts of Cancred.ca, a leading Canadian digital badge and micro-credential platform. But today's not about Cancred. I'll be talking about badges and micro-credentials in general, using examples from several platforms. The logos you see are some of the clients we serve wearing our different hats. As you might have guessed, I have a badge-based e-portfolio, and I also invite you to check out my Open Recognition Ambassador badge, which links out to that portfolio. In a way, my visual bio is a bit of a preview for what I'm going to cover today. First, we'll talk about why new ways of skill development and recognition are needed. Then we'll explain what digital badges and micro-credentials are and why they can be a good solution. Then we'll dive into lots of examples of badges and micro-credentials in the wild, including the new section on opening up recognition. At the end, I'll do a bit of reflection on how this can fit your context as a career practitioner, and that will conclude the video, and I'll be online to take any questions and other feedback. All set? Let's get into it. So, better ways to develop and recognize skills. The World Economic Forum told us back in 2020 that half our workforce will need retraining by 2025. But what skills will they need? Only 2 of them in this list are actually about technology. The rest are very human skills. The one that sticks out for me in the context of lifelong learning is active learning and learning strategies. I think it's safe to say there is a skills gap. Skills shortages are getting worse. They're driven by things like demographic change, low participation rates by marginalized groups, rapid changes in globalization, digitization, and a lot of uncertainty in recent times has been driven by the COVID pandemic. Big, clunky credentials and traditional hiring practices can't keep up with the demand. We need more flexible and agile ways to develop and recognize skills. It's a VUCA world that we're living in. Volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. This is a world that resists compartmentalization of skills and knowledge into neat little boxes. Some people say that we need to think about the T-shaped student, or maybe learner is a better term. The vertical part of the T represents deep knowledge of a domain or a specialized skill, and the horizontal part represents the transferable personal and social skills that you carry forward in life. And that life or career can be a long one. We'll have to change how we work many times in our careers, even if we stay in the same place. That means we have to keep on learning, developing new vertical skills, and deepening our horizontal skills. The T-shaped metaphor is a useful way to think about skills, but the reality is actually more holistic than that. These skills interact with one another. The holistic view is that human skills and specialty skills work together, so that social and behavioral skills can provide the glue for domain knowledge and the application of skills, and help with transferring skills and knowledge from one context or one job to another. Digital fluency is a horizontal skill that's becoming more and more important. This is what we need to become engaged and effective and resilient. There's a lot of talk now about competency-based education, getting away from knowledge-based courses and seat time, and focusing on competencies that can be authentically demonstrated in the context where they're needed. This is particularly important in fast-moving industries such as information technology and biotech, where they can't wait for traditional courses to be developed. What is a skill or competency? Miller's pyramid for assessing competencies was developed for the medical profession, but it also works well for other kinds of skills and knowledge. The bottom two layers are more about knowledge. The upper two levels are about being able to demonstrate the application of knowledge and skills competently. And the kind of assessment changes as you move up the pyramid. For example, is it more important that your doctor cutting you open got 100% in a multiple choice bubble test about surgery, or that they have a good surgical track record? Not all of us were lucky enough to make it all the way through secondary and post-secondary education, but all of us have picked up important knowledge and skills in the school of life, what I like to call lifewide learning. These skills deserve to be recognized and validated. UNESCO calls this recognition, validation, and accreditation, or RVA. Here in Canada, we usually call it prior learning assessment and recognition, or PLAR. Finding out what people already know and can do is not only more open and equitable to learners, it can save time and money for all concerned. UNESCO's Institute for Lifelong Learning has been focusing on learning ecosystems, skills for life and work, and inclusive learning for decades. I like to cite this list of key messages from 2020 because I think they're important and should feature more in conversations about lifelong learning. I'm not going to read them all, but I bolded some text that I think is significant. And I wanted to particularly highlight concepts like holistic and collective, because I think that far too much of the rhetoric around skills is reductive and individualistic. We're not programmable robots. We're human beings who work with others in organizations and communities. By the way, Edmonton became the first Canadian city in the UNESCO Global Network of Learning Cities last October. That's worth checking out. Which brings us to badges and microcredentials as a flexible response to the needs of skills development and recognition. There tends to be a bit of confusion of technology and content that I'll try and clear up in these slides. Most microcredentials and digital badges use the same credentialing technology, which is open badges. So let me define open badges for you. Open badges are credential documents dressed up as pretty pictures. They're graphics files that contain embedded data, sometimes called metadata. It's structured according to a standard, with links to more information and ways of verifying that information. We can look under the hood of a standard open badge to see the kind of information that's required on the left and the information that's optional on the right. The actual content of those information fields is up to the issuer, which allows for lots of flexibility in the technology standard. Open badges can be created and shared on any platform that supports the standard. Here are some example issuing organizations. A lot of them are educational institutions, but any organization can issue open badges, just as any organization can issue a certificate if they want. Unlike most certificates, however, the information inside open badges can tell you pretty quickly what that badge is about, who issued it, what the topic or skill is, what the level of learning is, how much effort it takes to earn, how the learning is assessed, any accreditation, and so on. This makes them more transparent and useful for careers than your typical certificate. Open badges can be combined into clusters or pathways, and those pathways and badges themselves can make the learning much more visual. They can be shared on social media, such as LinkedIn, to help build digital profiles. A nice side effect of that sharing on LinkedIn is that learners are also sharing who awarded the badge, so they're helping build the profile of the issuing organizations. And they're doing it in a very transparent way, which makes the quality of the learning much more visible. Open badges were invented by Mozilla Foundation in 2011 as a more inclusive way to recognize learning and achievement. In 2017, Mozilla passed the standard over to OneEdTech, a US-based EdTech standards body, which has led to a more of an institutional focus, but the community roots are still strong. Here's a quick example of an open badge for Save the Children in the international humanitarian sector. The badge image indicates it's an online course, about 8 hours of effort, and it's assessed. That's confirmed by looking at the details inside the badge. And we can even see the badge earner's answers to the questions in the badge application form. By the way, this feature is optional and controlled by the learner. They don't have to share the evidence if they don't want to. This is Mozilla's original vision. Learn or achieve anywhere. Collect your badges from multiple sources in your own central backpack or portfolio. Share them online and in social media to help you unlock new opportunities for learning or employment. Here's what an open badge microcredential looks like on LinkedIn. The Certified Training and Development Professional designation is a significant credential for members of the Institute for Performance and Learning. It takes a lot to earn one. It's a great addition to the licenses and certifications section of a LinkedIn profile. Notice the icon is the logo of the organization, not the badge image. Clicking on See Credential takes you to the full hosted version. There's more to social sharing than LinkedIn. Here's an example of a free badge portfolio or wallet for badge earners. The free account comes with a default profile page that you can use to build a polished professional profile with relevant personal information, a showcase of top badges, and even the geolocation of the earner on OpenStreetMap as an option. Earners can go further to build special purpose pages that can profile a particular area of expertise or act as a cover letter for a particular employer. These pages can be shared standalone or as tabs in a portfolio headed up by their profile page, as you see here. Earners can share a link to their portfolio in their LinkedIn profile. There's even a field labeled portfolio waiting for it. But the Passport itself is a social community platform, and there's lots of exploring to do there, such as looking at the badges and profiles of other users in the gallery or on the OpenStreetMap. Once academic institutions got involved, it wasn't long before we heard the term microcredentials. After all, credentialing is part of the DNA of colleges and universities, and they see big opportunities in the modularity and stackability of microcredentials. But what is a microcredential? Well, it depends on who you talk to, and several variations have been put forward. The current working definition from UNESCO captures a lot of the common themes that I've highlighted for you here. I actually participated in this exercise. One element that's not there is the notion of workplace relevance, which appears in other definitions and frameworks, and for a lot of people that's important. Many government funding programs encourage partnerships between education and industry to make microcredentials relevant to workplace needs. Beyond microcredentials, though, we still have a need for Mozilla's original vision, flexible ways to recognize and encourage learning and achievement to make a difference in people's lives. That includes informal learning and recognition. I'll be talking more about informal badges later in this presentation with examples. The point here is that Open Badges is a flexible standard container that can include formal and informal digital credentials. The actual content of the credential can communicate its purpose and how formal it is. So, Open Badges can support a spectrum of formality within a larger spectrum of credentialing, and I'll lay that out for you here. Open Badges are a subset of digital badges because some digital badges can just be gamification stickers instead of portable credentials. Microcredentials are a subset of open badges, but not all microcredentials are open badges. For example, some certificates you might get from a MOOC might not be open badges. Not all micro-credentials are for credit or can stack into larger academic credentials. Not all academic credentials are digital, although we're definitely moving in that direction. I've included some keywords to characterize both ends of the formality spectrum, but bear in mind that most examples lie somewhere in between these extremes. Despite all the buzz around micro-credentials, I'd like to say that open badges are so much more than micro-credentials, and micro-credentials can be so much more than course certificates. Learning is life-wide. Most of it, up to 90%, happens in the wild, outside the classroom. It's informal and usually unstructured, sometimes social with others, sometimes personal on our own. Here are some examples slotting into something called the 70-20-10 ratio. Some people quibble about the exact percentages, but most of us agree about the basic point. You can't take a course about everything. Trouble is, most approaches to micro-credentials assume that you can, thanks to Monty Python for this animation idea. I'll say it again, open badges are flexible. I'll show 4 main groupings here with some examples for each. I have to say that most of the activity, probably 80 to 90%, is still in the top group. Take a course, pass the assessment if there is one, earn a badge or micro-credential. A lot of the courses are delivered online, especially now during COVID, but they don't have to be. Most people would call these micro-credentials if they have a rigorous assessment. Certification and professional standing badges are certainly micro-credentials. There's not as many of them because it generally takes a lot more effort to earn. Many certifications have requirements that go beyond simple assessments, things like professional experience, signing a code of ethics, and often paying an annual fee. You may recognize the CTDP certification from that earlier slide about LinkedIn. You can also recognize different kinds of membership that can have different levels of formality. This kind of recognition can help newbies get themselves established in associations or new communities and begin to connect with others based on similar interests and common activities. There's recently been a growing awareness of how badges can help build professional communities. The last category is the most flexible one, and you see a lot of more diversity there. These are typically not based on rigorous assessment, but they can be rich sources of information and great community connectors for people who hold them. One of my favorites is the particularly helpful Moodler badge that's awarded for activity on Moodle.org, the global community website for that platform. For me, this badge demonstrates not only helpfulness, but also expertise, and that's not a bad combination. Badges and credentials can help in different ways at different stages of your life, often at times of transition, whether from school to work or from one career to another. I'm sure you could add other examples here, such as transition to Canada from abroad for international students and immigrants. Badges can be a very helpful way of making you and your skills more visible. I'm on the advisory committee for this US-based multi-state initiative. It's an inclusive recognition taxonomy for badges and micro-credentials that's very friendly to credentialing learning that happens outside the classroom. Maybe that's prior learning, the PLAR that I was talking about. Maybe that's also external learning happening now, such as work-integrated learning or even mentoring. The lead partners in this initiative are all post-secondary institutions, but their goal of recognizing learning wherever it happens is highly commendable. Many people ask about quality assurance for micro-credentials, and there are several models that can be followed. Some of them developed by educational institutions, and others developed for non-academic purposes. Many of these frameworks and standards are for micro-credentials, but notice the informal badge in the taxonomy on the right. Quality has many aspects, and some of the most important are fitness for purpose, consistency, and transparency. One thing we stress is to emphasize the needs of the learner over the concerns of the issuing organization. Badges and micro-credentials were invented back in 2011, and it took a few years for them to really catch on. But that's starting to happen, including here in Canada. The last 5 years has seen a lot of growth, and the next 5 years will see them move further into the mainstream. Now that we've talked about them in general, let's have a look at some real-world examples of badges and micro-credentials. These first examples are all pretty straightforward, what you might expect. Dakota Literacy Solutions is BC's literacy organization. They support community-based literacy programs and initiatives across the province. They award open badges for learners, their families, and literacy practitioners through their adult literacy database. World Education Services offers what I would call a notary service for international credentials, using open badges as a proxy for the original credential, verifying its authenticity and evaluating it compared to Canadian credentials. It's a premium option for end users of the service, which means they have to pay a bit extra to get it, but this kind of verification can definitely help an internationally trained professional. Excellence in Manufacturing partners with Canadian post-secondaries on a work-integrated learning program called WillWorks. In 2021, they adapted WillWorks to the secondary level, so high school students could start getting credit for paid work-integrated learning in manufacturing. The program combines self-paced learning, weekly facilitated discussions on the topics covered, and employer sign-off on the work placement. This is an example of a program-based certification for entry-level employability skills in the sector. The Gardner certification example shows how micro-credentials can be stacked into learning pathways that can have multiple levels. So many treks roll up into so many quests that lead to the master milestone credential. These are serious micro-credentials, but they're organized in a gamified way that makes them more engaging and visual. Red River College made a splash in Maclean's magazine in 2020 by creating a vaccine administration course in just 2 weeks. They continue to innovate in the micro-credentialing space, not only in the health sector, but in the creative industries, the manufacturing sector, and working with Indigenous communities. These are examples of mostly industry-relevant certificates. Mohawk College has been doing a great job working in the Hamilton area through their City School, which provides free post-secondary and employment programs for underserved audiences in the local community. Mohawk has partnered with several local employers to develop employability skills and provide pathways to careers across different sectors. This is an example of a micro-credential framework from a university, in this case Capilano University in BC. Their Continuing Studies Department delivers 3 levels of stackable micro-credentials with a minimum of 30 hours of learning effort for their unitary micro-credential, working up to their Certificate of Completion, which is more than 135 hours, in various combinations of courses, small programs, and other micro-credentials. That 30 hours of minimum effort for the first one is a little unusual. Australia, for example, has a minimum of 1 hour for a micro-credential for their national framework. Shopify may be going through some tough times now, but they became a global success, helping small vendors sell their products online. Shopify partners with colleges and universities to embed authentic Shopify technology skills in business and commerce programs. Students learn how to set up a shop, run a retail simulation, and even run a real shop for a charity or nonprofit. These achievements are recognized with Shopify micro-credentials that help students get started in their careers. Shopify also provides badged professional development for its remote workforce and its customers. The Institute for Performance and Learning is for professionals who support learning and performance in the workplace. Its former name was the Canadian Society for Training and Development. This was the one I was showing you related to LinkedIn. I4PL experimented with badges in a low-risk way at first, using them to recognize volunteer service in the association. Once they saw the badges were working well, they began issuing the sort of higher octane professional certifications. Since then, they have moved into micro-credential pathways that lead to master certificates. And they also issue semi-formal badges for professional development that's a little more casual, possibly delivered in a live webinar or a workshop. So those were the conventional examples of open badges and micro-credentials in action. And that's great. but let's think about how to open this up and make it more inclusive and engaging. I showed you this perfectly good learning pathway a few slides back, but what if somebody's personal journey takes them off that pre-built pathway? What if there's more than one pathway, more than one way through the maze, more than one way to the top? What if it's a constellation of pathways with lots of choices at every corner? Some of the thinking behind microcredentials has been a little conventional and simplistic and could use a reality check. Mozilla never actually promised that earning badge X would automatically get you job Y, just like pressing a button. So we should have a closer look at the role that credentials can play in career advancement. Post-secondaries and professional bodies are justifiably proud of their big macro credentials. Those diplomas and certifications take a lot to put together, and they're often required for entrance into professions. Elaborate quality systems have been built up around them, but these macro credentials take a long time to develop and earn, and they don't change very quickly. Enter micro credentials, focused, relevant, agile, and stackable into macro credentials, although that sometimes makes them a lot less agile in the post-secondary space. All these credentials are supposedly tickets to jobs and careers, if you listen to some of the rhetoric. But in terms of actually finding a job and pursuing a career, we still have the resume and cover letter. Hopefully we've got a profile on LinkedIn. If we're lucky and we work at it, our personal networks can help us make connections. That's usually been a big factor for me. Ultimately, the job interview is always going to happen with those behavioral and situational questions and maybe other types of assessment, checking out not just what your skills are, but what you'd be like to work with. So, credentials can help get you the interview, and they can support what you say in the interview, but the employer needs to know who you are, not what credentials do you have. Professions, especially regulated ones, are the exception here, but not really. A diploma is necessary, but not sufficient. In some ways, this is Career Development 101, and SARIC's 8 guiding principles can help us review that. Career development is lifelong. It's also life-wide, and lots of learning takes place outside the classroom. People are different, and they're more than collections of skills or that course they just took. Career development is self-directed, but it's also connected to supports and outside influences, and you folks have a lot to do with that. There are lots of informed choices to make along the way, and it's good to leave options open. It's not always a straight path, and there's lots of white water to test you along the way. It helps to have good people in your boat and to make connections with others on the river. Because careers can be complex to navigate, and your context has an impact on the choices you can make at any time. And echoing the high five from years back, it's a journey with lots of stages along the way. Ultimately, badges are more helpful when they're helping build interest-driven careers rather than programming people for jobs. You may have noticed a common theme to all of this. It's all about human capital being fit for humans, respecting them as individuals and personalizing their development so that they can become more engaged and effective human beings. That helps them, and it helps society too. Sure, we can have linear pre-built programs for learning and development, but we should also be able to support flexible, more personalized development pathways that can take learners on journeys and through doors that they didn't imagine when they started out. Why can't we have both? More than digital proxies for course certificates, you can think of badges and micro-credentials as signals about the people who hold them, a bit like stars in a night sky. Some are bigger and brighter, some are smaller and less bright. Some of them seem to belong together as a cluster and can help tell a story. Badges can help your clients and learners tell their career stories as they unfold. So, not all badges have to be micro-credentials. Maybe an informal badge can be a doorway to a more open development path. I get a lot of this thinking out of an international organization I belong to that grew out of Mozilla's Open Badges movement. It's called the Open Recognition Alliance. It's based in France, and it's had a major impact on career development in that country and beyond. In 2016, the Alliance developed the Bologna Open Recognition Declaration, and I'm proud to be a co-author of that declaration. The board, as we affectionately call it, is not boring. It's a clarion call for a universal open architecture for the recognition of lifelong learning and achievement. Many individuals and organizations have signed this declaration since 2016, and I encourage you to do the same if you agree with us. On that same website is a matrix developed by Serge Rivet, a key thought leader in the community. It's called the Plane of Recognition, and it's a really helpful tool to get people thinking about recognition in new ways. The bottom left quadrant is where most people begin with badges and micro-credentials, very institution-centric, retrospective, formal, really just doubling down on static certificates, diplomas, and transcripts. There's certainly a place for that, but it leaves a lot of value on the table. These are conformance badges that verify and authenticate learning. The bottom right quadrant is still institution-centric, but more forward-looking. This includes badges as learning contracts or launch pads for learning journeys, smart badges that might appear after other badges are earned, badges that can stay alive with the addition of further evidence and endorsements by others. These are enabling badges that can take learners forward. The top left quadrant is retrospective, but it shifts to a non-formal community-centered focus. These include things like scout badges, but also affiliation or membership, and maybe recognizing achievements of groups. These are inclusion badges that help build community. The top right quadrant is where the magic starts to happen. Community-centered, future perspective. These are achievement badges for individuals, but also things like peer endorsement, peer issuing of badges, and even self-issued badges, including what Serge Rivet calls a dream badge. That could be a call for recognition by the community based on a goal such as, I want to become a climate expert, meeting people sharing the same dream, or could help in achieving it. These are empowerment badges that bring control to learners and communities. So that's a summary of the issues and opportunities of open recognition. Let's look at some examples in action. Over in France, CIBC, not the bank, is a national federation of skills assessment centers for adult learners. They're exploring how client-centered approaches supported by badges can help the underserved and undervalued populations attach to the workforce and find their way into productive employment. They call their method activation of potential. Instead of a traditional deficit-based gap-filling approach, their client-centered method begins by recognizing clients as individuals who already have skills gained through lifewide experience that they may not be aware of. These skills can be discovered, activated, enhanced, and connected to career goals. Beginning in small steps, clients can work with counselors and advisors to build their confidence and start to exert some control over their career paths, setting goals, making choices, developing plans, and executing them. It takes more than competency assessments and remedial coursework. It means building trust, engagement, and commitment, and that comes from starting with the client and working with them in an appreciative environment. This is an overview of the CIBC system, roughly translated here by me, showing how the client is supported in their journey toward a productive and fulfilling career, based on the belief that I can do it, as this adaptation badge demonstrates. CIBC uses this matrix of experiential badge categories as a menu to design their badges. Don't worry too much about the detail. I'm just using it here to show you the breadth of recognition across the top, from knowledge and skills to engagement and participation. And down the sides, we have levels of commitment, not levels of expertise. Levels of commitment and engagement, from initial discovery to mastery and teaching others. Many French organizations beyond CIBC are starting to use this matrix as a guide for more appreciative approaches to learning and recognition. Shifting gears, this is a really interesting example of authentic recognition of skills in a global community. eNABLE is an open international network dedicated to providing prosthetic limbs to people in the global south based on 3D printing technologies. It's got a global volunteer supply chain that designs and manufactures the limbs and gets them where they need to go. Volunteers become certified with badges and micro-credentials in the various technologies through mentored experience so they can provide services in their region. It's not just certifications. There are also opportunities to be recognized with design challenges, awards, and for building out the community itself. The Explorer's game is an introduction to the community. It has informal badges to help engage new members. I'm also currently a volunteer member of a couple of US-based communities of practice around badges and recognition. We have regular meetings where we develop our thinking, work on websites and social media that promote that thinking, and also make presentations and lead workshops that put that thinking into practice. For example, the Keep Badges Weird crew leads badge pizza workshops, where badges are assembled like pizzas using different combinations of ingredients. And I led a workshop at last year's Badge Summit called I Failed Forward, where people earn badges by reflecting about times when they converted failure into success. I guess you could say that I helped keep badges weird at the summit, and I do have a badge to show for it. We actually make a point of recognizing each other in our communities. I'm kind of proud of my 5 times barn raiser badge for helping build the badge.wiki website, another community project. Quickly, here are some other examples of the kinds of badges that we develop in these communities. You can see that they're about self-recognition and recognizing peers, not just about clicking through a course. Some of them are pre-built with application forms to guide reflection and recognition. Others can be worked up from scratch. I often use the I Have a Hidden Talent badge as a skills discovery exercise in workshops. There can be some very interesting skills in any given group of people that would be hard to find out any other way. I recently started working with a professor from Cal State who I met as a volunteer in some of these open recognition communities. She focuses on first-generation students whose parents didn't go to college, and transfer students making the jump from 2-year college diplomas to 4-year degrees. So it's about student success for a largely BIPOC student population. And it's also about career development, helping students discover skills and passions that may be linked to the communities and backgrounds they come from, and also the kinds of communities and the kind of world that they want to help build. For example, the Student Researcher Badge encourages undergraduate students to develop authentic research projects as a form of active learning that helps build meaningful knowledge in a domain. My Legacy is a program where students select a community organization with a particular need, then complete a project for that organization and write it up as part of a credit course. Ascent Digital course does the same thing, but it focuses on using digital tools and technology transfer back to the community. Discovering strengths, finding passions, making a difference. Does any of that sound familiar? Doesn't it sound more appealing and authentic than yet another self-paced soft skills course? This is the kind of value we're trying to achieve with badges. It's about authentic connection, connecting people to themselves and to their communities. There's a concept from Japan referring to what gives a person a sense of purpose, a reason for living, and it's all about balancing internal interests, abilities, and goals with pragmatic concerns like making a living. We have things we love to do. We have things we're good at. We have to do some things to get paid, and most of us would like to do things that the world needs. If we try and combine these goals, maybe we can get paid to deliver something the world needs, but we may not be very good at it, so our occupation might be a bit precarious. I don't think I could make a sustainable living as a software programmer, for example. Maybe we're good at it, we can get paid for it, but it's not something the world needs, and we don't really like it. I have a friend who started as a stockbroker before becoming a United Church minister. Maybe we love it, we're good at it, but the world doesn't really need it, so deep down we might feel a little useless. I wonder how many people buying and selling NFTs on the blockchain really think that they're changing the world. Maybe we love it, we're good at it, and the world needs it, but we have trouble making the rent. Having all 4 goals in balance is a state called ikigai. It's a dynamic balance that can take hard work to achieve and maintain. It's the ideal we all hope to achieve. Badges don't make it happen, but they can help. I really wish these more open approaches to recognition in careers with badges were more widespread in Canada. I actually believe that the career practitioner community could have an impact in moving us in that direction. If you're interested in exploring this further, here are some options for you. You'll be hearing and maybe talking more about badges and micro-credentials as time goes on, and maybe you have some ideas about how they could be used or improved in your context. Maybe they could be more relevant and personalized to your clients, for example. Depending on your situation, maybe you could work with other organizations on credentialing initiatives, making them better. Maybe you have an idea that could be funded, perhaps with a partner. More and more governments at various levels and other funders are funding this kind of work. For example, I'm looking forward to seeing the results of the partnership between the Canadian Career Development Foundation and the Labour Market Information Centre. In the meantime, consider earning some badges and micro-credentials yourself. Could micro-credentials and badges help you with your own professional development and career, helping you and your clients? We are, all of us, on our own personal career journeys. So here's your first chance to earn a badge based on your learning today. If you complete this form telling us what you learned and how you can apply that in your work, you'll be issued a badge that links to this video, the presentation deck behind it, and your reflection on what you learned all in one digital package. You'll also have the option to receive a PDF certificate of the badge. There's no obligation for doing this. It's just an opportunity to activate your own learning today and carry that learning forward. We'll keep this opportunity open until the end of March because the recording of this presentation will be shared after Cannexus, but we advise you to submit it soon after you watch the recording while your learning is still fresh. And that's it for my presentation. I hope you found it useful. If you're watching the video as part of Cannexus on January 23rd, I'll be able to answer any questions. Otherwise, feel free to reach out to the email you see on the bottom right, dawn@learningagents.ca. I wish you all the best in the coming year.